Hello everyone, I'm Jamie. Welcome back to another video. I'm very excited to be bringing you my July wrap up today. You guys know how these videos work. I'm just going to talk through all the books that I read in July. I read 14 books in July and I had a pretty good reading month and I'm super excited to get into them, but before I do, I just want to briefly talk about today's sponsor. I am so excited to partner with Skillshare for today's video. In case you've never heard of Skillshare, Skillshare is an online community that hosts thousands of online classes and members. It's a place where you can get inspired to learn new skills with their large variety of classes on all sorts of different topics. There are so many informative and engaging classes, whether you're interested in something more creative, such as like watercolor painting or crochet or learning a new instrument, or if you're more interested in something a little bit more creative, career focused. Skillshare is absolutely the place for you. One of the classes I've been super obsessed with is learning how to read tarot cards. As someone who has dabbled in the art of tarot cards in the past, this is just a really great place to up my skill level, and it's given me so many new insights on the art of tarot to then take the skills that I have learned and put them to work in a super impactful way. I have honestly learned so much from this class and I'm really excited to put it into motion. But there are also so many other classes that I'm interested in checking out. As an actor, it's really important for me to be able to do a whole bunch of different accents. There are literally classes on learning a bunch of different accents. There's also so many other classes that I'm interested in, like learning a language or creative mindfulness. Honestly, there are just so many to choose from, which is just super exciting. If you want to unlock your creativity and try something new, then Skillshare is offering the first 1,000 people who click my link in the description box a 1-month free trial. I would 100% take advantage of this opportunity. Skillshare is a place that I have wanted to try out for so long, and now that I'm doing it and engaging in these classes, I have gotten so much value from them. So again, thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and remember to click my link if you want to join me on this exciting journey of learning new skills. Now let's get into all of the reading that I did in July. So like I said, I read 14 books. I had a very wide variety of ratings, and let's just get into it. The first like 7 or so books that I'm going to mention are books that I read for my 24-hour reading challenge. I talked about them very extensively there, so I'll just give brief thoughts on these ones. The first book that I read was The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy, and I absolutely loved it. Of course I did. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Every single person was telling me to read this and they were like, it will not disappoint, and you were all 100% correct. It did not disappoint. 5 freaking stars. Basically, this follows the events of the first novel, which I won't go into too much because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. Like, this is one of those sorts of books that you just need to read. It's YA fantasy, but it reads so fast. There are so many different twists and turns, and our 2 main characters are just so exciting. I usually have issue with a lot of YA fantasy protagonists, but Evangeline is just so charming, and being inside her head is one of the most exciting things. The fantasy imagery in this honestly reads like a classic fairy tale, and it's just so fun. There are also so many beautiful quotes, even though the writing style itself isn't super overwritten or flowery. It's very straight to the point while still being able to say so much. Like, I genuinely love the writing style so much. It's just so good, guys. I could gush about this series for the next 3 hours, but I will save you guys that because I don't know how many people want to hear it, but just know that this book, 5 stars, genuinely loved it so much. The next book I read in July was Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. So this is a mystery thriller, and it had been pretty hyped up. Like, I'd seen a lot of people really love it, and I ended up giving it 3 stars, which isn't a bad rating at all. I feel like people have misconceptions sometimes and think that 3 stars is bad. No, 3 stars for me is good. It is above average. I did really enjoy my time reading this, but I did find it to be a little bit ridiculous and a little bit too earnest. I feel like this concept could have been so fun and exciting if it was a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, but it just seemed a bit silly for me, and it wasn't really like aware of how silly it was. So basically we follow our main character Daisy. She's a bit of a wallflower. She's the youngest sister in her family, and she has been kind of overlooked by everyone in the past except for her niece and her grandmother. They go to her grandmother's house in Cornwall on like a cliff for a family reunion where the grandmother can read out the will before she passes away because she feels like she doesn't have much time left. Of course, a lot of family drama ensues because of this, and unfortunately it's a very rainy, thundery night, so they are stuck in one place. I love novels that are all set in one evening, so this setting was really exciting to me. I just found the writing style to be a little bit much, and I felt like there were inconsistencies in the story. The plot twist was just too ridiculous, but it was still a page turner and I still really enjoyed it. I thought the characters were all very fun and exciting. They could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but for the most part I did really enjoy the characters, especially the grandmother. If you are looking for a pretty standard thriller, then I would definitely recommend this. I think Alice Feeney does write engaging books, just sometimes they're not perfect to me, and that's absolutely fine. So I did give this 3 stars. Next, I read another 3-star novel, which was Along for the Ride by Mimi Grace. However, this one is a romance. Basically, in this novel, we follow our 2 main characters, Jolene and Jason, and they go on this road trip to help Jolene's sister and brother-in-law, which is also Jason's best friend, to help move their stuff to a new place, move their furniture. Jolene and Jason do not have the best first encounter, so it's pretty enemies to lovers road trip vibes, and of course they are fighting their attraction for each other along the way. I think the biggest thing for me is I wish this book was a little bit longer, and I think it should have focused a little bit more on the road trip. I would say that the road trip, even though it is, you know, described as a road trip novel, it looks like a road trip novel, it was less than 50% of the book, and those were the most exciting parts for me. I found all of the stuff to be happening towards the end just a little bit bland. I found once they were off the road trip, there was kind of no real like motivations, or I didn't feel like they were very fully fleshed out. However, I did really love both the characters. Jason was just gorgeous and Jolene was so fun and exciting, and I really love those confident, like, don't really care what people think characters, and Jolene was exactly that. I think the enemies stage moved a little bit too fast. I feel like we didn't get a lot of tension for a long time. The relationship did move very fast, but that's just always to my personal taste. I will always prefer a slow burn, but yeah, I just feel like the book could have been longer. It's like less than 300 pages, so of course I would prefer the book to be a bit longer as a slow burn queen. But again, it's still a really fun romance, so I do recommend it if you are a romance fan. But yeah, if you're like me and you like things to drag on, then this may not be the book for you, but I still really love the characters. By the way, guys, I really do apologize for the lighting going really in and out right now. We have very temperamental weather at the moment in New Zealand. Anyways, next book. Next, I read The Chase by Al Kennedy. This was a reread for me for my Patreon series read along that we're doing of Off Campus and Briar U, and this is the first book in the Briar U series. I reread this thinking that maybe I would find more to enjoy from it because I really do love the Off Campus and Briar U world. So I was like, surely with my new love for like the world, like as a whole, I love the series, surely with that I will enjoy this book more. I definitely did not. I found it entertaining, but there's so much wrong with it that I have to give it 2 stars. For me, it's still a page turner. It's still funny and fun to read, but I had so many issues with it that I just kind of had to laugh, and maybe that's why I found it so entertaining. Basically, this novel follows our main characters, Summer and Fitz. They both go to Briar U University. Fitz is a hockey player, but also a bit of a nerd, like game designer, and Summer is, you know, a rich girl, gets into a bit of trouble, very fun loving. They end up being roommates, but there's a whole lot of miscommunication because like Summer had a crush on Fitz and then overheard him saying something not very nice about her, but Fitz was just battling his attraction for her. Yeah, I don't know, I just found the book to be a little bit annoying. I really don't like our 2 main characters. I have more of a soft spot for Summer, but she's a little bit like girl boss feminism, girl power, not a lot of nuance with those conversations. And also Fitz is kind of giving incel. He was giving incel with the way that he would describe, like, you know, Summer to be vapid, and obviously he didn't mean that, but like he's thinking it. I also felt some of the actions that were took not to be like non-consensual, but they definitely towed the line, and I'm just not super okay with it. But there are so many lines that I just found so fucking ridiculous that, you know, I had a good time reading it. It was very silly, but yeah, definitely just too many issues for me, and honestly I prefer some of the side characters. I can't wait to reread the second book in the Briar U series because I really love the characters in that book, which I will hopefully be doing very soon. But yeah, this is definitely one of the worst of the bunch for me. Next, I read How We Fall Apart by Katie Zhao, and this is a YA mystery thriller, which I unfortunately gave 1 star. This was incredibly disappointing because I've been wanting to read this for such such a long time, ever since I heard it announced, and I was just immensely disappointed, unfortunately. Basically, this follows a group of friends at a very elite private high school, and one of the girls from the group of friends unfortunately gets murdered. There's also like a Gossip Girl type anonymous website which posts a whole bunch of secrets about other people at the school, including this friend group, so a lot of people are starting to think that perhaps this friend group had something to do with the murder of their friend. What was so unfortunate about this is that I could not tell you anything about the characters. They were so underdeveloped, which made for a lack of real motivation about things, and also not a very exciting read because I just did not know who anyone was. I just felt like we were told what they were doing rather than given any indication of who they were as people, aside from some maybe really basic personality traits. I feel like when you're doing a mystery thriller, the characters can kind of come second to the plot, that's fine, but they need to be fleshed out. Otherwise, I have no interest in the mystery because I don't know who this mystery is even about. Also, I found the final plot twist to be so out of left field that I was just like, okay, I've kind of given up on this now. It's just a bit ridiculous. So this one was really disappointing for me, especially as a lover of YA thriller mysteries, just thriller mysteries in general, but I do love a bit of a YA thriller mystery as well. And unfortunately, this one just fell a little bit flat because of the writing style. There were also so many topics that I felt like could have had a much more nuanced discussion. I was just left wanting so much more. So yeah, unfortunately this was a 1 star, but it's okay. We move on. Things did start to look up for me when I read The It Girl by Ruth Ware, which I gave 4 stars. This is a very exciting mystery thriller, and I was very apprehensive about reading this because while I had heard good things, I've only read one other Ruth Ware book before and I did not like it. So I was like, okay, we're gonna see if Ruth Ware can win me over again, and she absolutely did, because this was so exciting. It's giving dark academia, which I absolutely did not expect. But basically we follow our main character Hannah. She is currently happily married, has a child on the way, but when she was in college, in this really exciting college friend group, she witnessed her best friend and roommate not get murdered, but she found the body. She put a man away in prison with her testimony, but once he passes away in jail, there is some other information that comes up about this case however many years ago, where maybe Hannah thinks that she put an innocent man away and it was someone else, maybe a bit closer to her. It was so exciting, and it was dual timeline as well, which is one of my favorites. We heard about the college days, and then we also got to experience Hannah figuring out this mystery in the present day. I really loved the characters. I absolutely adore a college setting, and it felt really dark academia in terms of the friend group. It didn't remind me of The Secret History per se, but I just love dark academia when there's a really good friend group with very fleshed out characters. There were so many stages where I had no idea who it could be, but it was honestly so exciting. I love a murder mystery. It was so well told and it kept me engaged the entire time. So I do really genuinely recommend this if you are a mystery thriller fan. It didn't quite have the 5-star vibes, but it was still a very high 4 stars. And then finally, the last book I read for that particular 24-hour reading challenge video, I read Fair Catch by Candy Steiner, which is another new adult college sports romance. This is definitely a taste thing as opposed to an objective like craft thing, but I did rate it 2 stars just because I found it to be pretty boring. But we follow our 2 main characters, Riley and Zeke. Riley and Zeke were like childhood best friends, like brothers best friend vibe, but something happened in their teenage years which caused them to not be friends anymore. When they get to college, they end up being on the same college football team. So that was something that was super exciting to me, was that Riley as a woman got to be on the sports team. So that comes with its own obstacles and trials and tribulations, which I found really exciting to read about. Like, I did love those aspects of it, but the actual romance just left something to be desired. One of my favorite things about sports romance college novels is that usually we follow 2 different perspectives, and so there's very minimal sports. So that's really exciting to hear about when we do get to read about the sports. As a non-sports girly myself, but a lover of sports romance, I love hearing about the sports and the team from the male perspective and getting a break from it when we read the female perspective. And while I love the idea of Riley being on the football team, I feel like maybe it would have been a little bit more exciting if Zeke potentially was not a footballer, because we just got so much sports team dynamic that I found myself a little bit bored, unfortunately. And it's very disappointing because I actually read the second book in this series first and really loved that one. I also just found like the characters, they weren't my favorite. I found myself getting a little bit bored, and I also had a really hard time rooting for Zeke because the thing that happens in their teenage years, I wouldn't have forgiven him either. So it was hard to root for him for the majority of the novel before we find out what really happened. We find that out at the end, so it was just frustrating because the entire time I was thinking about this awful thing that he had done. So I did end up giving this 2 stars, but that's not going to put me off Candy Steiner. I still want to read the rest of this series because I feel like this is probably, there are so many things that are so specific to this book that I didn't love that aren't going to be in the other ones, so I will still read the series. But yeah, this one was just an unfortunate 2 stars for me. Okay, then the next 3 books are books that I read for my Purple Books reading vlog, so again I will try and be fairly brief. But the first book that I read for that was The Pledge by Cale Dietrich, and I gave this one 2 stars as well. Maybe I didn't have a good month. There's lots of 2 stars. No, it's okay. I did. I still think I did. But anyway, The Pledge, 2 stars. This is a YA horror slasher novel set at a college. See, you'd think it'd be new adult because it's set in college, but the way it was written, so YA. Like very easy and basic, and probably something that I would have found too young for me and too basic for me when I was a teenager. But basically we follow our main character Sam. He is going to college and he wants to join a fraternity, but he's very apprehensive and he has PTSD because when he was a teenager he went on holiday and some of his friends were murdered, and he was nearly murdered as well before he killed the murderer in self-defense. So he obviously has a lot of PTSD from the situation. When he's at college, there all of a sudden is someone new who starts killing all these boys in the fraternity, and it just brings back a lot of trauma for our main character Sam. I really loved the gay representation of him and all the other gay characters that we had as well in the periphery. I really loved that aspect of it. I loved all of the references to like RuPaul's Drag Race and stuff. That was just really fun, and I loved the kind of gay romance within it. I just felt the biggest downfall for me was just the writing style. It was not written very well. There was barely any description or imagery. Instead, it would just be like, we did this, and then we went to the shops, and like things that were described that we did not need to see because it's boring. But then there would be massive time jumps of things that I would have wanted to see on the page, and instead were just described to me as in, well, the other day this happened, and it's people talking about it. I just felt, yeah, pacing was off, writing style was off, not super exciting to me, and definitely not as scary as I hoped it would be. It didn't really leave me on the edge of my seat. But yeah, I'm just not a fan of the writing style, unfortunately. Really hope it improves with the next book. And then next I read Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey for a bit of a rom-com moment. I went in with low expectations, and then it kind of met my expectations head on. Like I went in and I gave it 3 stars, and I kind of imagined I would give it a 3 stars, which is actually good. It's a big improvement for Tessa Bailey for me, considering the last couple of books I've read from her. So I did actually pretty much enjoy my time reading this. Basically we follow our main character Georgie. She is a clown for children's parties, and she has always been in love with one of her brother's best friends. His name is Travis, and he went on to be a professional hockey player, I believe. No, baseball. Professional, some kind of sport where you hit a ball, you know. Anyway, he undergoes an injury and ends up being kicked off the team, so he has to go back to his small town, and he is very down in the dumps, and it's basically on Georgie. She puts it on herself to try and help him out and get him back on his feet. They end up doing a fake dating situation. There's just a lot that happens in here, actually. There is a lot that happens, so I'm not going to try and explain the full plot, but there is a fake dating situation, childhood friends, I guess, to lovers, and all those tropes that are very exciting. The main thing for me is that I loved Georgie. I thought she was really cute. It was giving sunshine, but not in a way that was too childish, I don't think. And a big plot point is that her family sees her as a child and doesn't take her seriously, and so I really liked seeing that. I just didn't like Travis. I didn't like the way he spoke to her. I didn't like the way he spoke about her. I find sometimes with Tessa Bailey is that the male love interests are just too lusty. They're far too lusty. They care more about physical appearance and how turned on they are by the main character than like their intelligence and their mind and their kindness. And that's sometimes very frustrating for me. I also found dirty talk to just be too much. I am not a fan of the smut scenes in here. Usually I don't care for smut scenes. I'm like either, you know, read them and I'm like, oh yeah, fun, or I'm like, if they're not there, I don't mind. I'm not a big smut scene connoisseur, but like this is one of the first ones where I actually have to critique it because like it's just too cringy for me. Lines and lines and lines of dirty talk that if someone said to me in the heat of the moment, I'd be like, sorry, get out. the moment's done, it's gone. Like, I just can't deal with the dirty talk in this novel. So yeah, unfortunately I did give this 3 stars just because of those reasons. It really did bring it down for me, but I was really enjoying it in the beginning, and I do really love Georgie and her journey. But yeah, we'll still read more from Tessa Bailey. You know, I've heard some really good things about other books by her that are on my TBR shelf, but this one kind of just, yeah, in the middle. And then my reading slump tried to stop me, but it did not prevail. I read Belladonna. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoyed this. Despite being in the midst of a reading slump when I was reading this, I really enjoyed this. So this is the first book in a series. It's like a gothic fairy tale. It's fantasy, and basically we follow our main character Signa, who has been touched by death. She's immortal. Death can't kill her, but she kind of has some of death's powers. Everyone around her kind of dies until she goes to some long lost family, their manor, and stays with them, and there's a murder mystery situation happening, and so she kind of uses her powers that she's still coming to terms with to try and figure out what maybe happened. I really loved the imagery in here. It was so beautiful. I could picture this manor perfectly in my mind, and Adeline Grace has such a way with words when it comes to describing a setting. I found a cheeky little romance in here to be very exciting, definitely to my taste, and I just love a murder mystery in a fantasy setting. I love murder mysteries anyway. Like, any single murder mystery, I will read it. Fictional though, I don't fuck with true crime, but fictional murder mysteries I'm obsessed with. I will read them any setting, but it's so exciting when it's fantasy, and that fantasy world is told and described very well. So I really did enjoy this book. I definitely blame my reading slump for not enjoying it to its full potential, but I know that the next book comes out very soon, and I cannot wait to dive back into this world. After that, I read Brutes by Diz Tate, which is in my most recent reading vlog, my experience reading this, and I actually read this for a Patreon exclusive video as well, so I do have a full reading vlog for this on my Patreon where I go into much more detail. But this was a bit of a hidden gem. Very exciting reading this one. I rated this 4 stars, which took me completely by surprise, and also I do need to stress this will absolutely not be to everyone's taste, and I am very aware of that. It was definitely something that I think I read it at the right time. I think it was definitely what I needed. But yeah, anyways, this is a coming of age novel set in Florida. We follow a group of like 13-year-old girls who get obsessed with this older girl in their small town in Florida that goes missing. That's kind of all I have to say about it. Like, this book is the epitome of just no plot but all vibes, because even though that is the plot that I would describe it as, we're not really following that the entire time. That's maybe like a small fraction of the novel. I really love the bits set in the past with the 13-year-old girls and the group of them, because it's told in like with we pronouns. We're not really following one individual character, we're following a collective. And I really love that. I'd never read anything like that before. We did also get chapters from the individual girls in the group when they are adults, and we get to hear more about their individual experience and how they felt about their childhood and things that happened to them. And I just found that to be really interesting. I would say this book is definitely more of a showcase of creative writing as opposed to any sort of strong characters or character development or any semblance of a plot, really. But it's creative writing that I really loved. It was so unsettling, and I felt like all of these really disturbing, kind of gross and ugly things were painted in such a romantic light, even though they are quite heinous. And I thought that was incredibly creative and really exciting to read, especially as someone who is a very nostalgic person. I love to romanticize things, and quite often I will romanticize the ugly things that I've been through. And when I say ugly, I mean like literally physically unattractive. I love romanticizing like times in my life and places in my life that aren't the most aesthetically pleasing. You won't ever see them on my Instagram, but they just live in my mind as the most beautiful experience. I really enjoyed this book. I thought the writing was just beautiful, and I cannot wait to see more from this author. So if you are someone like me and you do like to branch out a little bit with your reading taste, you kind of do want to read something that does feel slightly unsettling and off-putting, but the writing is just so beautiful, then I would really recommend this, especially if you're just like you don't need a strong plot or strong characters, you just want to read something weird, then yeah, I do definitely recommend this absolute hidden gem of a novel. And then the final 3 books I will talk about, I do have a reading vlog that features these 3 books coming. I haven't gone around to editing it yet because I'm insecure about the video. I don't feel like it's very good, but if I just put my big girl pants on and get it done and post it, you will see my reading vlog for these 3 books. But until then, I will describe them very briefly. The first book I read for that unknown, unpublished video is Ive Survived by Holly Jackson. I really liked this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I've been wanting to read it for such a long time, ever since I even first read the first book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder trilogy. I knew that I wanted to read everything that Holly Jackson writes, and I was not disappointed. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Basically, we follow our main character, Red. She is going on a spring break vacation with her friends in an RV, and then while they're traveling, the RV breaks down and they are held hostage by an active shooter. So it's all 6 of them trying to survive the night and figure out what to do. All 6 of them also have a secret, and the active shooter is trying to get one of them to admit to their secret, and then they can all leave. It was definitely very thrilling. Holly Jackson is one of those people who you start the book and you're like, I'm not convinced just yet, and then as it goes on, you don't think that she will do these drastic things, and then she does them. It's one of those books where my heart is constantly racing, like the epitome of a good thriller. I really ended up liking our characters in this one. Again, with The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, when I first read it, I was like, I don't know about these characters, and then as the series went on, they hold such a special place in my heart, and kind of a similar thing happened with my journey with reading this. There were a few jokes that were exactly my sense of humor, and then a few jokes that were like, I could do without that, but it also was a YA novel, so I do have to keep that in mind with some of the jokes just being slightly immature. Of course they're gonna be immature, I'm reading about teenagers, but I still really enjoyed it. Holly Jackson has such a craft, like she just knows how to write a page turner, and I hope she never stops. I hope I get to see Holly Jackson thrillers on my bookshelf every year. I absolutely loved this, but yeah, 4 out of 5 stars for some of the reasons that I mentioned. I then read The Perfect Son by Freida McFadden. The first time I've read a Freida McFadden physically, which was an experience. But again, I also really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Freida McFadden is one of those authors where when I read the book, like, do not get me wrong, like I can see that the writing itself is not very good. It leaves something to be desired. However, her plot twists and her plots are so engaging that even though I'm like, yeah, the writing itself isn't good, I just want to keep reading. I want to know what happens. She creates such interesting plots, and this was no exception. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. In this novel, we follow our main character, Erica. She has 2 children, and she thinks that her son is perfect. He is her favorite. However, she knows that he has a dark side, and so when a girl at their high school goes missing, she starts to think the worst, as does the rest of the community. It was really fun. I thought it was such a page turner, and I kept trying to guess what would happen. I still had no idea what was going to happen. I nearly cried because the girl that goes missing, we get some parts from her perspective, and she was like the sweetest human being in the world. I wanted to protect her with my life. So Freida McFadden being able to evoke those feelings from me, which I don't usually feel when I read her books. Normally I'm just like, give me the goods, give me the plot twist. This time, like, being able to have those emotions, I was like, wow, okay, like this is maybe gonna be one of my new favorites by her. It was genuinely so good. Because it's Freida McFadden and I don't think the writing is the best, I did find that there were some inconsistencies in the text. For example, Erica describing her son as her favorite. She would protect him with her life. At the same time, some of the other things she was saying, I was like, do you hate your son? Like, I couldn't tell. And that was kind of the whole plot of the book, and I did find there were like inconsistencies there in the writing, but I still really enjoyed the novel. I enjoyed the plot, I enjoyed the characters, so that's why it still gets the 4-star rating from me. And then finally, the last book that I read in July was The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead, and this was my Patreon book club pick. So I did read this on my Patreon, and I do have a full spoiler-filled reading vlog for this on my Patreon. But I had a really interesting time with this. I don't know, there's a much larger discussion for me that needs to happen about this book that I can't sum up in 2 minutes in my wrap up. I'll try and briefly explain. I did give this book 3 stars, and Ashley Winstead is the author of one of my favorite thrillers of all time, so that was quite unexpected for me. But this book, basically, we follow our main character, Shay. She has a best friend from high school called Jamie, who runs a true crime podcast. She starts listening to Jamie's podcast where he describes a murder that happens at the college Shay went to, and it is Shay's old best friend. She goes back to New York to help Jamie kind of uncover this murder mystery, and we start hearing more about Shay's time in college with this cult that she was part of, where women are just meant to serve and men like have ownership over women. So this book does kind of go beyond just being your basic mystery thriller. There are many more discussions to be had about this book, about what feminism means to you, women's right to choose how they want to live their life. It was very, very dark. And I gave it 3 stars because a lot of the messages I felt to be very, very important. However, despite even knowing the content warnings in this novel, I felt very icky reading it. And books like this just don't feel very triumphant to me. I think the writing was excellent. We cannot argue that. But if I'm going to read escapism and it's going to be a feminist think piece style thriller, a lot of the time those thrillers feel very triumphant because it's women being the villain and enacting violence on men because of the treatment that they have received in the past at the hands of men. So when I'm reading a book where it's just countless graphic violence against women from men, it doesn't feel like women have triumphed. Even if they do at the end, it just feels too close to home and a little bit too close to real life, and I just did not enjoy those graphic scenes. There is a note in the acknowledgements from Ashley Winstead that I did have to consider when reading it, but personally I do think a book should be able to stand on its own 2 feet without an author's note or an acknowledgements or anything like that. And while I do think the craft in this book is excellent, the way the story was weaved, the plot was weaved, I just felt way too uncomfortable reading it, and some scenes I just didn't love. I also did find that there was a very unnecessary romance, and I just felt like it was not the time or place for that sort of B plot. A big part for me as well, because it was kind of like a feminist think piece, is that, you know, it's kind of like Shay uncovering this mystery and fighting back against this cult that she was a part of. She can't do it without a lot of help from Jamie, who is her male best friend who is in love with her. In that sense, it also made me feel not very triumphant when reading it, because it was like she could only really do it with the help of a man. I think the book would have been completely different if perhaps Jamie was a woman. I still think this book has really important messages. I genuinely do, but there were just things that made my reading experience feel very icky. At one stage I was like 1 star, at one stage I was like 5 stars. I ended up settling on at 3 stars just because while I think the book is good, I think it is very, very good, I can't ignore my subjective reading experience with it, and I think that's really important to acknowledge when I personally rate a book. So I did end up giving it 3 stars. I had some amazing discussions with my patrons about it, but in terms of my actual reading experience, it wasn't fun for me, and this just isn't to my taste. I just don't like reading about violence against women, whether that's written by a woman or a man. Obviously it's a bit more acceptable if it's written by a woman, but like, it just doesn't feel like good escapism to me because it just happens too much in real life. But yeah, anyways, 3 out of 5 stars. Anyway, those are the 14 books that I read in July. I really, really hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I know it was a very long, rambly one, but my wrap-ups usually are, I don't know how to shut up. We know that. Of course, a cheeky reminder that all my socials are linked down below, as well as my Patreon. So if you do want extra exclusive content from me, if you want 3 extra videos a month, 3 extra live shows, all of the details are on the page down below. And of course, a cheeky reminder to click my link to get your 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Again, thank you so much, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. So guys, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching and for choosing to spend your time with me. I appreciate you all so much, and I will see you very soon in the next video.